Welcome to Hail to the Podcast, brought to you by the Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan athletics for the Rivals Network. You can find us over at michigan.rivals.com. I'm Trevor McCue, senior editor for Maize and Blue Review, joined as always by our insider publisher, the king himself, Josh Henschke. I said your name weird that time.
It's all right, whatever.
Henschke. That was funny when I dug that up. That was the first conversation you and I ever had. Talk about the weird ways people say your name. I can't remember how I found that, but yeah, years ago I was like, oh, that's so funny. And then now you pay me to talk about stuff. Haha. It was a long play.
Yeah.
I win. So speaking of talking about stuff, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to dive into, since there is something to talk about with Michigan basketball transfer news, at least. It's been kind of quiet on that front for a little bit. We've got a couple players we want to touch on there. We've been focusing on Michigan recruiting, obviously, every one of these episodes. We've dug into the QB position, the edge position. This week, it seems to be the running back position that's getting a lot of chatter. Similar situation to edge and offensive line, a lot of names and maybe not a lot of spots. So we'll get into that a little bit. And then our own Brock Heilig, I'm hoping he can join us. If not, we'll still kind of dive in. We did an interesting feature on Twitter this week talking about the 10 biggest or highest impact players for Michigan in 2023. And just kind of want to go through our list and see what we think about that. And then if Brock is in, I want to talk about his incredibly hot take, a player he left out of the top 10 that I was a little shocked by. But we'll start with, like I said, basketball news because we have some, right? Do you want to try and say his name? We talked about this. You want me to hit it for you?
It's Olivier Kamwa.
Yes, it is Olivier Kamwa. All right. So the Tennessee transfer, obviously, God, I've lost track of time now. I don't remember how many weeks ago it felt like he was going to commit to Michigan any moment.
Yeah.
And then he started leaning into the pro route and then went through the G League camp, did not get the invite to the NBA camp, and now seems to be exploring college options again, which is a positive. We heard he might even pursue Europe instead of doing the college thing. So we got some bad news first, which was a visit to West Virginia. Yeah. But Josh, rumor went around on Twitter tonight and you were able to confirm it. So you want to talk about what's going on with Mr. Olivier?
Yeah, no, I think the first thing is that, there was a little bit of nervousness, coming out of Michigan Twitter yesterday when word was that, he was having a visit with West Virginia. And, Michigan wasn't mentioned because really the idea and the whole thing that with Kamwa is that he was going to pick Michigan if he was going to choose the college route, and still very well could. But now there's a little bit of nervousness out there because now he's allowing other schools to get into the mix. West Virginia has had a very positive transfer portal, period. I guess if that's what you want to call it. But the thing is too with West Virginia is that they've already added a player at his spot as a transfer. So unlike Michigan, they're pretty close to being full. So Michigan, I mean, the benefit that is in Michigan's favor right now is that they can offer playing time.
And a lot of it.
There's a big role to be had there. But long story short, we have confirmed that he is expected to be on campus on June 2nd. He's already visited with the program before via Zoom, met with the coaching staff, got a tour of the facilities and all that stuff. But now he gets, a full on look of everything. And it's good that this visit is happening after his West Virginia visit and not before. So that way, and who knows, we don't know if that's the only 2 visits he's going to take. There may be more down the line, but, Michigan's going to get a really good crack at him. And, I still think Michigan is right in the thick of things right now. I don't think I can sit here and say he's 100% going to Michigan today. But things can change so much in this transfer portal world that, he very well could end up at Michigan after all. So we'll see. But either way, very positive thing that he's coming to campus. And, really all signs are pointing to him looking to return to school for his final year of eligibility. So a good thing if Juwan can get this deal done.
West Virginia being this like NIL powerhouse is weird to me.
Yeah.
But it's also Huggins, man.
Yep.
Like some of these dudes that are thriving in the NIL world are just doing the same stuff they've always been doing, right? So it's like,
Yep.
yeah, some people are like, West Virginia, really? I'm like, yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting point though. Like they do have this really, really good transfer class, but yeah, this spot's taken. So that's an interesting, are you taking a smaller role for the 1 year? Are you looking to prove something? Are you ending up going the Europe route eventually anyway? Like, yeah, it'll be an interesting dynamic for sure. And then I wonder, I think I brought this up to you on the board or where, if Love not being a part of the team is a factor, right? But part of that could be the other name we're going to talk about, which is Ray J. Dennis.
Yeah.
I always hate this because it's like after the fact, it feels like I'm trying to hedge, but like I would have said this before too. If you asked me Dennis or Love, Dennis is a better fit.
Yeah.
Right? We've talked about that. I think I like Dennis for the team better. I wonder if Dennis feels like it's a better fit though. If he wants to be the off ball too, or if he wants to be a point guard, that was kind of the only thing I hung up on, but we got to see him play against Michigan. Yeah. I've always been a little biased against dudes that have whooped Michigan before. I do that with the NFL draft too. I'm convinced Quentin Johnston's going to be an absolute stud because of what he did against Michigan for TCU. But anyway, Dennis visited over that weekend where he hit 3 spots, Illinois and Baylor. Sounds like one team is out and then another team is emerging. He's got a connection out there in Utah. How's that looking now in terms of Michigan's chances?
Yeah, not great. I don't think it was great to begin with. The big thing when Ray J. Dennis first hit the portal was that, this is a done deal to Illinois. He's an Illinois kid. This is a done deal. It's, don't even worry about it. He's going to Illinois. And then word started to leak out that he was going to take other visits, and Michigan was the next visit after Illinois, after his official, or I guess you'd call it official visit. I don't know, but it's a visit to campus.
I don't know what's official and what's unofficial with those.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So he took a midweek to Illinois, and then a couple days after went to Michigan, and that word kind of leaked out that he was on campus. And then shortly after that went to Baylor, and even as far as, or as late as I think it was Friday, the word was that, it's still going to be Illinois. Michigan is on the outside looking in, and you had Baylor involved too. So it was Illinois and Baylor were the 2 big ones that were involved. And now fast forward to, overnight / today, we're looking at a whole not completely new, but a relatively new set of schools, with Baylor being there, and now Utah being involved too. He took a visit to Utah, and now they're heavily involved and may honestly be the leader right now, which again, Michigan's still on the outside looking in. They can't buy a bucket. So, no pun intended. They can't buy a bucket right now when it comes to transfer portal. But it's unfortunate, but when you look at it, it makes sense that why Utah's there, because I believe his former trainer is on the staff at Utah. Yeah. So it kind of makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it is a big change, because it is a little bit of an upset, because we all thought Illinois was going to be the choice for him no matter what. Now they're completely out of it.
Well, and I felt like Illinois might have wanted Love more. So that was kind of this interesting dynamic. And then now it sounds like
they may start going for Love now. Yeah.
Right. And then, Love's story changes every day too. I've heard Texas today, and it's crazy trying to keep up with the transfer portal stuff. And then I just can't get over this roller coaster. I mean, when we were hearing all the names early on, and, before guys were starting to get into the portal, we were like, man, how's Juwan going to make room? Like, how's he going to flip this roster? Is he going to have to tell somebody to leave? And we were guessing like, Glenn probably makes sense, right? We could see, Barnes was going to be an obvious one, and then Hunter was like, oh, okay. And then anyway, and then Matthew Cleveland, and, all these different names come up. And now here we are close to June. We've got 3 empty chairs, and Olivier is one of them. And Dennis was kind of the surprise visitor, like you said. And then we're still reaching for other potential names, right? And Michigan's recruiting 25 and 26 guys at this point, right, for basketball. Yeah. So they're, and again, we've had to say multiple times, just because we're not hearing anything doesn't mean they're not doing anything, right? That's exactly. A crazy suggestion. They know they have 3 empty chairs, right? Olivier feels like one we've kind of been counting in the bucket for a long time, and Dennis would be a really cool addition. And if you swing, you go 0 for 2 on both of those, it feels dire, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the Love situation kind of changes everything too, because you had 2 scholarships open with Love, and you get Olivier in the mix. Now that's only
you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah. And now all of a sudden you lose Love. Now you've got 3 spots, and then even with Kamwa, you have 2 spots that you need to fill, and that's a big part of your bench to still 2 spots, 3 spots is a lot to fill on the bench.
I think you're being kind by saying bench. There's not a player on this team that averaged more than 9 points a game last year.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Doug, I guess, who's going to be the leader of this team? The score, it's so, yeah, if it was a couple chairs and it was like, yeah, we could really use a guy that could, maybe a wing, somebody could play 2-3, or maybe, another center, but I'm not 100% sure we know who's starting right now. I know I'm not 100% sure I know who's starting right now. So it's interesting. I'm not ready to bury anything. I've seen a lot of very negative predictions and thoughts and whatever. So let's let it all play out. It's it's definitely not what we had hoped, right?
Yeah.
We had fingers crossed maybe Kobe would come back, and then since then it feels like it's just been nothing's really trended their way. It's just been a really difficult offseason for basketball. So it has not been a difficult offseason for Michigan football in terms of recruiting. Maybe there's some other stuff, right? But recruiting's going really well. We've been highlighting a couple positions because, everybody's kind of got their favorite recruits and guys you really hope Michigan gets and blah, blah. And you're starting to do some math here and realize, man, wait, like who's getting left out, right? So running back's been a really interesting spot. Very early on, we identified Jordan Marshall as a big recruiting target. That's a win on and off the field because of the Ohio State battle. Taking a guy like that, somebody they wanted. He's already skyrocketed up their rankings once, but I identified him as somebody I thought I wouldn't be shocked if ends up number 1 running back, potentially, 5-star status by the end of this. He's that good. We'll see how he goes. Yeah. And the other name that's been tied to him since the beginning has been Taylor Tatum. We've got a couple other prospects we can talk about as well, but I think everything kind of starts and ends with Tatum. You've had a future cast in for him for a little while. There's a time period where it kind of felt like things were maybe not shading away from Michigan, but I don't know, just wasn't as solid as before. But where things stand right now, I think you feel as confident as you have in this whole process for Tatum.
Yeah, no, I do. As you said, it's kind of been through this, I guess, a little bit of a metamorphosis, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But I feel good now as I ever have that Michigan's going to end up with Taylor Tatum in this class to kind of fill out that running back tandem. And that's a heck of a tandem. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
That's quite a tandem.
Number 3 and number 5 running backs in the class today. And again, I wouldn't be shocked if either one of them end up higher ranked by the end of this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. It's you kind of when we found out that other schools were going to be involved, a school like USC, who has a running back committed like Michigan, Georgia has options, and they have a couple of guys. And it doesn't really seem like USC and Georgia now are becoming factors. I don't know whether that's, maybe more for USC's case that they think that he's kind of a strong lean to Michigan, and Georgia kind of has different options where they can say, okay, that's fine. If you want to go here, we'll go elsewhere. But either way, I think the strong buzz coming out of Texas is that, he's heavily considering Michigan. And if that decision were to come today, I would 100% pick Michigan. And I think that's going to be the choice. I'm not really sure when a decision is going to come. He's visiting at the end of June, an official visit. Maybe he announces during, or maybe he announces after. I don't know, but I think the big question right now is, could Michigan go 3 in the running back spot? Because there's names out there, but I haven't really gotten anyone to specifically say, whether they're going 3. I asked someone, involved with the recruiting and stuff about Capana, and my response was who? So that kind of speaks about what's going on there. It's just another name, but yeah, I mean, I don't think really Michigan needs to go 3, but if they feel comfortable taking 3, I think that's fine. But
I
if
want
you've
them
got a
to.
chance, yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt going 3, but I mean, you're settling for Taylor Tatum and Jordan Marshall. I mean, and you decide to not go 3. Oh, darn. No, that's terrible news. Not really. That's 2 of the best running backs in the 2024 class that are going to be in your running back stable that's already full heading into the 2024 season. So, I mean, it's do they go 3? I don't know. I haven't been able to get anyone to say yes 100% that they're going 3. I know there's a prediction for Capana out there elsewhere, and and I'm not discrediting that, or I'm not disputing that fact either. It's just I'm speaking from a standpoint of where I'm getting my info from and who I'm talking to. And I've spoken to the kid directly, and he's kind of been in the process of, he's been saying like, I'm aware of it, but Michigan's in my top group, but I'm still in the process of kind of figuring things out. And, he's going to take a visit to Michigan. So we'll see what happens. But, if I were to say today, it's Jordan Marshall and Taylor Tatum in that group.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah. I can't get the feeling that Dupree and now Capana, the name that kind of shot up this last week or so, not that they're backup plans, right? That's where I don't know. That's where it feels like they could go 3, because even the folks that think either Dupree or Capana or some of these other guys might be heavy Michigan leans, it's not because they think Tatum's not coming. They also think Tatum's coming, right? So it's kind of this interesting dynamic where, like you said, we would hear somebody would say, oh, I don't know, look at USC. And then I would talk to my guy in Texas. He's like, nope. And then even some USC folks like us were doing 180s and kind of telling folks, I don't think we're going after Tatum. And then Georgia was the other one where it's like, well, they don't really have anybody yet. So we could see Georgia, that could be the Southern option. And then now they're trying to flip the Florida State kid. Yeah. Right. So, Antoine, real quick, bringing up Capana, the 3-star from Nevada, looking like Blake and just being underrated. Yep. His tape is incredible. And I was giving a lot of props to Hart on our board this week, just because I think he's doing everything. He's landing the top guys like Marshall, potentially Tatum, and he's also finding some of these underrated dudes where you watch their tape and you're like, whoa. Now he only had 70 carries last year, but for 1,001 yards.
It's ridiculous. That is so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's nuts. So yeah, he's explosive. He does a lot of the things that you would want with Michigan. He hits the hole quick, good cuts. The dude's full speed instantly. He's a really good player. But I think we've been addressing folks because immediately it was like, wait, does this mean Tatum's not coming? Is this bad for Tatum? There's been no signs that has anything to do with it.
Yeah, no, those two aren't mutually exclusive at all. At all. It's not even, that's not even a comparison.
And I'll tell you what, the way Michigan plays football and the way the transfer portal is these days and et cetera, I don't think it would be crazy to take 3 running backs. I really don't. But I'm not saying they will. I don't know, blah, 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 but I wouldn't be shocked.
Right. Well, and you never know. Capana might be a late ad too, I mean, because you can get through the season and say, okay, this is a hypothetical. Let's say Stokes and I don't know, Cole Cabana leave. They enter the portal. Now you've got an extra spot at your running back room. Okay, now you can add Capana into your group. Now there's 3 running backs and problem solved. Now you've evened it out. And even out the process. So, it's I always say this when it comes to recruiting. When people ask me, oh, who is Michigan going to get next? Who's going to commit? Half the time, these guys who commit, we aren't even talking about them in May, in June.
Right.
Some of these guys pop up in November, sometimes even December or after.
Darius Clemens was my favorite.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah. These guys come in out of nowhere. So, maybe, as I said, Capana is a late add, and you add to your group of Marshall and Tatum. But, there's always a name or two that pops up out of nowhere that we're not even thinking of right now. And there's always a situation that pops up that we're not even thinking of right now.
Yep.
It's just so early to kind of, I guess, hypothesize how a guy like Capana factors in when you've got a guy like Tatum coming in next month, and all, things that we're hearing are pointing to them getting Michigan. So there's so many situations that still need to be played out, still need to be fleshed out, even on Michigan's roster that could still need to be fleshed out. So
well, this is new territory for us. Michigan's normally got 5 commits at this point.
Yeah.
Right. Barbecue's coming up, and it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I said 16 last time. I think it's actually 17.
Yeah.
Because with Cole, yeah, that's outrageous.
Yeah, half those visitors are actually going to be commits,
yeah,
not targets this time around.
Right. So, yeah, and I think that's a good point. I just touching on, again, kind of wrap up the thing, is you just have to be happy with what Michigan's doing. Mike Hart is doing an incredible job. Like you said, we don't know all these different scenarios. I would say they're just planning for all those different scenarios. It's that simple. And Hart's killing it, man. Every time I talk to, I don't know if it's because of the gray hair, me being older, you and I keep joking about I do better with parents than I do the recruits. But when I talk to parents or coaches or whatever, these old folks like me, they just rave about Mike Hart, man. They love him. They absolutely love the way he recruits, and the way he comes in and learns about a program and shows just genuine interest in these kids. So they're killing it. Whatever happens, I do think it's going to be Marshall and Tatum. And I'm biased because I like Capana's film. I like Dupree's film. I wouldn't be mad if they took 3, but yeah. There's no negative signs. Tatum, we still feel really good about. You've got your future cast there. So,
yep.
So
we didn't really touch on Dupree.
No,
I don't think. I mean, no, not to rain on your parade, but I don't think Michigan is going to get Dupree. I don't think Michigan's even a factor for Dupree right now. He is visiting, but I just don't think he's being as highly coveted by Michigan as Dupree would like to be.
I'm going to be honest with you. Half the reason I want Michigan to get him is if they don't, I think he's going to Wisconsin.
Yep.
And that dude is a Wisconsin running back.
Yep.
And the only reason he won't destroy us is because they're running air raid offense for some reason.
Yeah.
Potentially. But I watched that dude, and he's Braylon. He's Jonathan Taylor. Just Wisconsin, when they went on that run where they just had a dude every single time at running back, like that's who he reminds me of. He'd be such a good, again, it's going to be so weird to see Wisconsin not being Wisconsin this year, like running an air raid. I don't know. Maybe that I'm wrong on that, because what is Illinois the other one too? That's pretty high.
Yeah, it's either right now it's Wisconsin or Illinois.
At least he'll be in the West, I guess. But I really like the
Illinois too. He'd be really good.
Yeah, they're all that. I mean, that's the thing. And again, like Antoine said, when I see an offer or we hear somebody's trending, and it's like, okay, look at the rankings. Okay, look at the offer list. Sometimes it's like, oh, the offer list outmatches ranking, vice versa, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes you're like, oh, why are we going after him? And then if you put on their huddle highlight tape, and again, I know it's highlights, there's no low lights, but it's just like, how did they find this dude?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Bishop Gorman's a powerhouse. Don't get me wrong, but still.
That helps.
Yeah, but they're doing a great job. That's all that matters. And as of today, we still think Tatum's going to end up blue. So we'll see how that goes. Brock was unable to join us, so I'm going to have to talk about his hot take without him here, I guess.
Yeah.
But we did kind of a cool thing this week. See if I can get it to pull up. Josh, I thought you were in this.
No, I was not. I got left out.
You're not one of the cool kids.
No.
But
I'm too good for these polls, I guess.
You're gonna see some faces in here. You're gonna, So my buddy Double BB's Big House won I'm gonna have to work on that handle for him. He can do better. Anyway, he reached out to a few of us and kind of asked us, hey, 10 most impactful Wolverines, not best, whatever, truly measuring impact is what he said. And being the lunatic that he is with spreadsheets, he put them all together, came up with average scores, and came up with a top 10. And let's see, tell me, can we see the top 10 good here, Josh?
Yeah. Yeah.
There we go. So this was the top 10 that was the cumulative of everybody chipping in. We can kind of go through this, Josh, and just talk about a few guys. And I know you didn't do yours, and I honestly don't remember mine. So I'm just going to go off this cumulative thing here. I was pretty close on some of this. The way I think of impact, rating an impact is the floor of a the floor of a player, the ceiling of a player, and positive or negative, what the impact on the team is, right? If he hits the ceiling, how impactful is that? If he stays at his floor, how good or bad is that, right? So JJ was number one for me as well. I don't know if you would consider JJ one, but I just think that,
I would.
Yeah. Because I think Michigan's national championship aspirations rely on JJ hitting his ceiling, right? Mm-hmm. And his floor appears to be really high based on last year. So that's where I had JJ at 1. I had Donovan Edwards at 2. Edwards was my number 1 last year as well. I can't project for injuries. I don't like talking about somebody that's dealt with injuries, being injury prone, whatever. But my thought simply was, even if Donovan and Blake come close to splitting carries, Donovan's factor in the passing game and what Moore's been saying about involving them more creatively in the passing game. I feel like Donovan Edwards could have a really big year. 1,500 scrimmage yards mixed in rushing, passing, or, rushing or receiving or whatever. Number 2 on this list was Blake Corum, which is not shocking, right? Corum was on a Heisman campaign last year before he suffered his injury. But the reason Blake Corum is number 2 and not number 1 on this list is because our Brock Heilig did not include Blake Corum in his top 10. Mm-hmm. I thought maybe put Donovan over Corum was a hot take, but he really thinks they're not going to run it with Corum as much, and that Donovan will maybe outshine him a little bit. And I was like, man, I think he said he didn't think Corum would get to 1,000 yards.
Wow.
Is what he said in the chat.
I mean, that's a little spicy. It's a little spicy.
I mean,
I don't know. That's just suggesting that Michigan is going to go away from everything that it's about. Its core values at the heart of this program is to run the ball. And so for Corum to not get 1,000 yards either assumes something went horrifically wrong for him as a whole, or B, JJ McCarthy transcended the offense, which no, it's not a bad thing. That's right. Not necessarily a bad thing. So yeah, I don't know. That's tough. It's tough.
I think Antoine touches on it here. Blake is more consistent and he can make something out of nothing. That's the difference. And I do think Donovan's going to do more of that this year. I know Donovan's been kind of a home run hitter. That run against Purdue in the Big Ten championship game where he bowled over a few dudes. I was like, yep. Right. I think you're going to see more of that. He's going into his 3rd year. He's progressively gotten better. So I do think we'll see a big year from Donovan, but I thought about it and I was like, okay, what if, even if this was like a Haskins Corum situation where Edwards assumes a Haskins like role, when Corum was dinged up in 21, I still think Corum's even in that role, top 5.
Yeah, I agree.
That guy, so physically, I think he's going to be in a better spot. I mean, we saw it with Ronnie Bell last year. He was actually faster, right? I do think the mental element of it, not like he's talked about so openly, which has been great, but like literally trusting yourself on those cuts and trusting your knee. That'll be interesting. But yeah, so I want to touch on that hot take, but let's go through the rest of this real quick. Will Johnson at number 3. I don't know if I can disagree with these. I mean,
I would arguably put him at number 2.
Really? Okay.
I would put him at number 2. I think the pass defense, like JJ, he can kind of transcend the pass defense. If he flops, I mean, I'm not saying that he's going to, but if he ends up not having a good year, Michigan might be in trouble because unless they've got some dudes behind him that we aren't talking about or we are underestimating, they could have a difficult year, pass defense wise. And so I would put Will Johnson at number 2. I mean, I think a lot of that falls on his shoulders, and he knows it. So yeah, I would put him at number 2.
Yeah, because I mean, there's an assumption when we talk about that CB2 spot this year that position is going to be challenged a lot because they're just not going to throw Will's way potentially.
Yep.
Right. So that's what he has to be, is that level of lockdown. He's arguably set up to be the best corner in the Big Ten this year, possibly one of the best ones in the country. But that next step's going to be, locking down whoever the other team's best receiver is, locking him down so they're not throwing that way. And when they do throw your way, you make them pay for it. There was another defender that played for Michigan back in the 90s. That was his deal, man. Right? With Woodson, it was like if you threw his way, he was picking you off.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see, because that's kind of been a thing too when people talk about who's going to lead in interceptions. Nobody really picks Will because they don't think they're going to throw his way.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to get his on limited opportunities for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think Will Johnson's year should be based on interception numbers.
Nope.
I mean, I think it should be if he has an extraordinarily high number like 8. Right. But, if he finishes the year with 2 picks, that's not necessarily a bad thing or a bad year for him.
Yeah, if he gave up no touchdowns and the QB rating is 20, something
exactly.
Crazy. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. I think that's a little bit of an overinflated stat when you're talking about CB1s, because either they're you're on a really bad defensive back team, or you're going up against the number 1 receiver and you're shutting them down. I mean, you're going to have balls thrown your way, and if you're more opportunistic and get interceptions, that's great. But I don't think you're going to be looking at Will's numbers and say, oh, he's only had 2 interceptions. This isn't first round quality. No, it's not how you get them, or it's not how much you get them. It's A, how you get them, and B, how you're playing as a whole, and see what do your other numbers look like. Are you getting torched? Are you not getting torched? How many passes are they throwing your way? So there's a lot of variables that go into that. But, I do think this pass defense is going to live or die with Will Johnson. And they have Rod Moore and Mike Sainer still in those numbers, but Will's your CB1, and he's got the length and he's got the size to match up with these bigger receivers that a guy like Mike Sainer still may not necessarily have. He has the technique and he has all the other technical stuff, but you're banking a lot on Will Johnson this year, and rightfully so. I mean, he played great that latter half of the year and just needs to kind of put it all together for a full year, and I think he can.
I think you just touched on 2 guys that are listed at number 9 and number 10 on here for those that aren't watching and are listening. Rod Moore is at 9. Mike Sainer still is at 10. I could argue for everything you just said about Will, moving both of those guys up potentially. When we talk about that CB2 role, I've been telling folks all year so far, remember what Dax Hill did at nickel. I think you're going to see Rod Moore potentially do that. Mike Sainer still potentially do that. A guy like Zeke Berry, who could play nickel and safety, potentially do that. But Rod Moore was one of the top cover guys on this team last year. So I wouldn't be shocked. They're not going to take Mike Sainer still off the field for Jaden McBurrows. Right. So those guys are going to be on the field. They're going to move around and pick up different dudes. Sainer still, the dude's just a baller. He's another guy where, like, I do a lot of numbers based stuff for our site, obviously. And it's like, oh, he actually gives up kind of a high completion percentage. Oh, he actually, whatever. But when you need a play, Mike Sainer still makes a play. Right. And then sometimes it's tough to quantify that in numbers, but it's tough to think this dude was a wide receiver 18 months ago. Right. But that's secondary. Another guy I'm going to call out for you every chance I get, because you've been on this dude since he committed. John Stacy commented, Hill, the 4-star freshman CB, is going to be real good at some point. And yeah, Josh, you have been all over Jair.
Oh yeah. No, the coaches, they think the exact same way. They think he's going to be a stud. They really think Jair Hill and Cam Calhoun are the future at defensive back for them. They think they're both in time are going to be really, really good. And Jair Hill, could be good sooner rather than later. I mean, a lot of these guys kind of take a jump towards the latter half of the year, so there's a chance that he might, see his stock rise towards the end of the year. But yeah, in due time, Jair Hill's going to be really, really good. Michigan is really high on them. And
Minter has compared him to Will Johnson.
Yeah. I mean, you can't get
lofty.
Yeah. You can't get higher praise than that. And really, when you look at Steve Clinkscale and his ability to develop defensive backs, I mean, you got to love the position all those guys are in, because
great coach, man.
Yeah, they're in good hands for sure.
Harbaugh's been trying to get that dude for a few years.
Yep. There's a reason why.
Absolutely.
Reason why.
Let's hammer through a few more of these. Zach Zinter comes in at number 5. I have no shock with that. He's the best guard in college football, if you ask me. I am surprised Trevor Keegan isn't on the list. Mm-hmm. I would put Zinter ahead of him, but not by that much. That duo, those are 2 of the 5 best guards in college football. It's pretty incredible that not only one, but both of those guys came back. Junior Colson's on the list because he leads Michigan in tackles, right? And he will this year too. Yep. He's the quarterback of that defense at the Mike. I will be interested to see if they send him on blitzes more this year, trying to create some pressure. That he's got some help this year. Michael Barrett and him pretty much ran the show last year. So he played some stupid number of snaps last year. Yeah, I'll be interested to see with Houseman and Jimmy Roller coming out of his role, steps back. At 7 and 8, we'll wrap up here, but the 2 defensive tackles. And I like this, having them right by each other, because I think we've been so excited about Mason Graham. We almost underrate how good Chris Jenkins is.
I agree.
Which is statistically, analytically, whatever. He was right in line with Mozzie Smith last year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
NFL scouts are very excited about Chris Jenkins.
Yep.
And that's an NFL body coming back this year.
NFL pedigree.
Yeah. So I remember, back to Don Brown era of recruiting defensive tackles and the tweeners and whatever. It was like, well, someday with Jenkins, when he fills out, someday is here and more.
Oh yeah.
The dude is a monster, man. Yep. So those 2 together.
Punch the mic. You just hammering the point home.
I didn't mean to. No, but overall,
you're driving home, you're like, boom, I am pounding the table for Chris Jenkins.
I just think, again, the kids here. Killing's all down with that. No, I have my one NFL scout buddy, and I think it's so interesting that every year there's a dude that gets his film watched, and scouts tell you, I was trying to watch him, but I kept watching this other guy. And when people were watching film of Mozzie Smith, they kept watching Chris Jenkins.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how good he is. So Mason Graham and him, those are run stoppers and dudes that can get to the quarterback. And Michigan has not had that on the interior since probably my favorite player of the Harbaugh era, which is Mo Hurst. And it's just so valuable when you're talking about the pass rush. We've talked about the edge a bunch, but I like those 2 guys on the inside. So overall, we could pick the list apart, blah, 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 but I thought that was kind of a fun deal. And the quorum not making it. I wish Brock was here. I was going to go JJ Redick on him. He was going to be my Stephen A, and I was going to destroy his ridiculously hot take. You don't play the game, Brock. You don't know. Yeah. All right. We are going to finish with something serious, because that's the best way to wrap up a show, obviously.
I've been looking forward to this topic all show.
Yeah. Look, we've had a difficult week with the Shemi Schembechler story. Initially when everything was trending on Twitter and the stuff was starting to pop up, it's tough to report on it because we don't really have comments from anyone. And, especially in this era, right, where not only can everything be political, but things that are political can be much worse than that.
Yeah.
Right. So, it was tough. And to be frank, we, the hire of Schembechler goes back to March. We pretty much knew right when the Raiders gig happened, or no longer happened, when he was let go from the Raiders, that he was going to come here. And there was already conversations back then about this hire potentially being problematic. It becomes official the middle of May 15. Feels like a long time ago. I said middle of May like it wasn't a week ago.
Yeah, right.
And Michigan doesn't announce it. There's going to be a lot of questions we have that we're never going to get answers on.
Yeah.
One of mine is Michigan not announcing it. That was, looking back on it, odd to me. That felt like maybe they didn't want to draw attention to it for different reasons, whatever. So he announces it himself a couple days later on his Twitter, and it doesn't take long for folks to get into his likes and see some things that are, again, problematic. You wrote your column today. We've been talking about it. Some things we wanted to say. Obviously Saturday, was it Saturday or Sunday now? I don't even remember. You and I both basically got a note at the same time that he was resigning.
Sunday? See, this is just like time.
It's been a weird thing. So whatever it was this weekend, you and I both got a note at the same time from someone that we heard he was resigning. We texted each other, reached out, got our confirms, and ran the story that he was resigning. And then Michigan put out a statement, I don't know, half hour later, something like that, confirming it. At that point, his Twitter account was gone, deleted.
Yeah.
And before that, he had erased 2,000 likes, roughly. And you still only had to scroll back to January, right? So I've been rambling a bit. You wrote a really good column today, folks that haven't seen it, michigan.rivals.com. Josh has his column up on this whole situation. So I will let you say what you want to say after I've rambled long enough now.
Yeah. I mean, this is just a colossal failure on Michigan's part. This is the colossal failure institutionally, in the athletic department. It's just a situation that should have never happened in the first place. Like, this hire should have never have happened. It's not like this was being held in secret since March. Those likes were there. And I'd even take it from problematic. I'd even take that word and bump it up to vile. You're talking about racist tweets, blatantly racist tweets. There's not like thinly veiled racism. This is blatant racism, transphobic tweets, just the whole gamut of ugly, disgusting stuff that doesn't help the rhetoric that particularly comes from Twitter. I mean, that it is a vocal minority, but they are extremely mouthy on Twitter. And it's not like these were secret leaked stuff. I mean, this was, I guess, hiding in plain sight. And, the fact that no one bothered to vet it, or even said, this might not be a good idea. It's a bad look. It's a colossal failure from the top down. It's just not a good thing. And there should be some accountability held for that, to let this process go on as long as it did. I don't think it's bad all around. And this just draws the opinion of freedom of speech, the right to free thought. There's a difference between giving yourself a right to free speech and spouting off and magnifying racist rhetoric, transphobic rhetoric, all that kind of negative stuff that doesn't belong in our world. I don't, that doesn't give you a pass. It doesn't give anyone a free pass. I don't care if your last name's Schembechler. I don't care what your last name is. It doesn't give anyone a free pass to magnify those kind of views. Now, those views were magnified and mixed in politically. This isn't a political issue. Racism isn't a left or right issue. This isn't, if you're racist and you support racist views, you're not labeled on one side of the fence. You're just a bad person, and you can't, that kind of rhetoric, you can't support that. You can't harbor that. And the fact that if they would have just, Michigan would have just hoped this blew over or hoped this went away, you're harboring someone who has that kind of thought process. Who knows what's being said behind closed doors. You're liking this stuff, you're magnifying it. So it's just a really, I hate to even call it unfortunate, because it's just so totally avoidable that, this didn't have to happen.
Yeah.
But yet it's another black eye on something. They just can't seem to not trip over themselves. And I'm talking about Michigan. They just can't seem to get out of their own way. And, this is a situation that never should have happened. Again, I support people's right for free speech. I support people that believe, beliefs that are different than mine. But what I won't support is people who believe in racism, believe in transphobia, believe in all of that kind of stuff that goes against everything. That it's just, no, I don't support it. So, again, saying that, giving him the chance to resign and all that stuff, this isn't Michigan doing a good job. It's, Michigan never not getting to this point. Should have never gotten to this point. So it's an unfortunate, again, I hate saying it's an unfortunate situation, because all of it could have been avoided. But it is what it is. It's another misstep in a long line of missteps that could have been avoided. But yeah, there is a big difference between, having an opinion and, going against what we should be doing as a humanity and as a people. So that's what I'll say about that. I've said my piece, and I think, I hope to never speak of this topic again.
No, I understand, man. I think you've addressed the context really well. I think something that I can say, not out of context, but not talking about the very specific context for a moment, in regards to the free speech and things like that. That became a professional account as soon as he put his Michigan title on there.
Yep.
And used that account for pushing Michigan messages, retweeting things about messages or Michigan, talking to recruits, right? When you go into the likes, and it's like, you see, I don't want to say any of the players' names because I just don't want it mingled in there, but you see a recruit and then you see something vile, right? And then you see a recruit, right? I've never held a job. This one, I've worked for a very large company. I'm not going to say their name, but I have worked for a very large company. I've worked for my dad's company. I've worked for small companies. In the last 10 to 15 years, I've never not signed something that basically says social media, public, whatever. When you're representing this company, you need to represent this company, right? Yep. So he is still welcome to say and do everything he wants. That has not been prevented here. But Michigan, the University of Michigan, cannot be associated with those things, with their initiatives. I mean, I'll say it plainly. He's recruiting predominantly black players, right? He's talking about education being used as a tool to convert children to other just different things. He's working for a university saying that education should be defunded. Like, you can't do it. You just can't. So if you're somebody who holds, and again, the politics line's been blurred. I think politics on both sides has become very volatile. So there were some posts that maybe if you're on the other side politically feel terrible to you. And then if you agree with them, don't seem as bad. Like you said, that's not what all of them were. There was vile racist stuff. But if you do agree with him on a lot of stuff politically, again, that's fine. But you got to understand why he can't mix that stuff with his job.
Right.
At minimum. And I don't want to get into the statement he put out through the PR firm. I know why he got a PR firm involved and blah, blah, blah. I'm not trying to pick on the dude. But instead of apologizing for clicking things a few times, which he seemed to suggest he really focused on the Jim Crow tweet specifically, I wish he just would have said, you know what? I have been sucked into this, right? I didn't even realize how consumed I've become with this until because this wasn't Donovan Edwards who retweeted something, quickly deleted it again, whether he didn't fully understand what he retweeted or somebody right away was like, dude, that's terrible, whatever. There's a pattern. Again, he erased almost 2,000 tweets back to January. That's 12 tweets a day. That's a lot, right? If he would have come out and said, man, I need to reflect. I didn't realize how deep I had gotten into this. I think I would have appreciated that more. I don't want to pat Michigan on the back for handling this quickly. I don't want to pat, I know, Harbaugh was involved in this and I know he obviously loves Shemi and I don't blame him for that, and I know he handled this from a good place in his heart. And I know he's going to hope good things for Shemi and that he finds a better path out of this. And that's what I hope for anybody. I don't want to send anybody to exile or ostracize them or whatever. I hope something better comes out of this. But yeah, from a Michigan perspective, man, we'll never know the answer, but did you have a blind spot because of his last name? Did somebody know and not want to tell Jim because maybe they were scared of how he might react, whatever? There's something operationally that keeps happening in this program. And at this school, there was a report today about with the grad student strike that Michigan is filling out fake grades, just weird little mistakes, man. And maybe some of this is the after effects of the previous president. And Ono has a lot of work he still needs to do. I think he's been very positive since he's been here.
We're talking about the Michigan president, by the way.
Yes.
I want to be clear.
I didn't even realize the context that I said that. President. Sorry. Yeah. President Ono's come in. He's done a really good job. Maybe there's more he's got to do. Whatever.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Sorry. Yeah. This is why we shouldn't talk about the and honestly, that's kind of the point, right? You stated what you said very well, and your column was really good. And I felt sick seeing some things, and there's some things I'm passionate about. But man, we like covering sports. And it would just be really, really nice if these kind of things didn't keep happening, because if I ignore it, I'm not doing my job and I don't care what people think. But when you see the criticism of Michigan people holding Michigan accountable, they're right. I can't ignore it, but I don't like talking about it, man. I just don't. So some things are not preventable and things happen and you have to deal with them. And some things are just so damn preventable.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to talk about uncomfortable things, but the only way we're going to be able to move forward is to talk about the uncomfortable, is to be uncomfortable with the uncomfortable. You're not going to make any progress if you keep staying in your little box and not doing anything and not getting out of it.
And that is the best part about freedom of speech, man.
Right.
That's the best part about it.
Right.
Yeah. It's and that's why I've said that before too. Like, and I went to college at a time where like I've seen very controversial people speak, right? And sometimes it's difficult, but those conversations are really important. So that's why I hate using the term both sides. I do understand kind of this push from both ways, but also sometimes this is how people get exposed, right? By being allowed to speak freely. And sometimes this is how people learn about themselves too. Sometimes you don't really know what you're doing or saying until you're confronted. And that's why I said, I know he put out the PR apology that he did. I hope there's some self-reflection, because he did say, and I know somebody specifically who knows Shemi and is friends of him, blah, blah, blah. Right. But yeah, from a Michigan perspective, just figure this out, man. It's the easy stuff.
Yeah.
So I appreciate everyone letting us do that. And I know people have strong opinions on it. And it's okay. And we're not trying to offend anybody either, but there's some stuff that's just not acceptable, man. And And I understand the free speech concerns, but again, the speech hasn't been limited. You can't work for a company and do that, man. And that's all there is to it. Okay, we could ramble for a while. So, Josh, thank you for saying it. That we're never going to talk about it again, hopefully, right?
Yeah, let's hope so.
All right, everybody watching and commenting, playing along with us live on YouTube, we appreciate you as always. If you don't know, search Maize and Blue Review on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. You'll get notifications when we go live every day with Dennis Fithian on his afternoon live program. We do Hail to the Podcast every Tuesday night. Again, we love you coming on. We try to feature your comments as much as we can. Otherwise, obviously, if you're listening on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, we appreciate you. Same thing, like, subscribe, make sure you're getting notified. And of course, I say this every week, but about 80% of what we talk about on this podcast, we've probably talked about already inside the den on our message board community at michigan.rivals.com. We would love to have you as members. Please head over and subscribe if you haven't already. It sounds cheesy. We try not to sell ourselves too much. Our community is the best. Our subscribers are our greatest advocates. If you have any questions about what we do inside there, ask them. I'm very confident in what they'll say. They're the absolute best. We have a really good group over there. We'd love to have you join. So other than that, for Josh, I will say good night, and we will see you next week on Hail to the Podcast.